Morning, everybody. I can see the numbers in the participant screen bouncing up there. But we might kick off. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today, Screenshot This, Using Social Media for Legal Education. My name's Vicky and I'm the Education and Events Director here at the Victoria Law Foundation. Now, before we kick off and I introduce you to our fabulous guest for today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country from wherever you may be joining us and recognise their abiding connection to this land, its waterways and community. Victoria Law Foundation HQ is on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and it's my privilege to pay respect to their elders and to all the generations of Wurundjeri people who've nurtured and nourished this land for over 50,000 years and continue to do so today, and I extend that respect to any First Nations people joining us today. We believe that acknowledging the past is an essential step to building a better, more equitable future. We recognise the impact of colonisation, its legacy of injustice, and the marginalisation of the Wurundjeri and other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Victoria Law Foundation aims to break down the barriers to justice for all Victorians through our work in research, grants, and education. We're committed to making a sincere and positive contribution to a better justice system for all of us, especially those vulnerable and most in need. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off here. Everyone's cameras and mics in the audience will remain off today. The chat function is disabled, but you'll notice that there's a Q&A box, so please use that. Feel free to pop any questions that bounce into your mind throughout the session into that, and at the end of the session we'll hopefully have some time for to answer some of those questions, and our fabulous guest Caitlin can inspire you all with her wisdom. The webinar itself is being recorded and transcribed and captioned, and we'll also send the link and any resources mentioned out after this and the slides as well. So keep an eye on your mailbox after today so you can keep coming back and watching it again and again and again, just because you'll be so inspired. Now let me introduce the fabulous Caitlin Caruana. So Caitlin leads Westjustice's government engagement, community development, social impact and media work. Prior to joining Westjustice, Caitlin worked for the federal government and the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, the Australian Embassy in Washington, DC, and the Australian Space Agency, which I'm pretty intrigued about, but that might be a whole separate webinar, talking to her about that. So Caitlin's going to tell us a little bit about Westjustice's project, Legal Street Smarts Socially Networked. And this project, funded by a VLF grant, led to the enhancement of Westjustice's social media to deliver legal information to young people via Instagram. So, Caitlin, I will now hand it over to you.
Thanks, Vicky, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. I will also begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that everybody is dialing in today. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people dialing in today. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you can all see this through the magic of technology. So I'm Caitlin Caruana. I am Westjustice's Director of Policy Impact and Engagement. I have been leading our media and particularly our Instagram work for 2 years now. So I'm going to run through the project, how we got to where we are with some examples, and then hopefully at the end there'll be plenty of time for questions. So at Westjustice, we are the community legal centre for all of Melbourne's western suburbs, which includes Australia's fastest growing population, Australia's most multicultural population, and the biggest per capita youth population in the country. The Wyndham LGA alone has 90,000 young people. So for decades, we have been delivering community legal education in places that we know young people already go. But we knew we weren't reaching as many young people as we could, and we were curious about social media. And so we sought a VLF grant to increase our capacity to deliver community legal education via social media. So after successfully receiving the grant, we brought in a media consultant to help us conduct workshops with young people and synthesize the outcomes. So by young people, we mean in the legal sense, we mean young people 10 to 25, But for the purposes of this exercise, we really were focused on kind of late teens, early 20s. And we consulted 2 youth groups about how they currently access information, how they want to access information, what sorts of legal topics they're interested in hearing about, and how they want that information presented to them. These were pretty intense workshops. The young people had a lot to say, not all of it kind. We did show them an example of some social media content we were considering, and I quote, they said, "Ew, it looks like an old person, like some 30-year-old did that," which I'm still wounded about 2 years later. So I'll take you through some of the learnings, some of which I think, most of which aren't surprising, but I think are still really useful to hear and consider as we're kind of developing that content, for young people, where and how they need it. So young people are really, really hungry for information, and they mostly rely on the internet to get it, particularly post-COVID. And where they can't find an answer on the internet, they do rely on their kind of inner social circles to find out the answers that they're looking for. Young people are almost always unaware that they have a legal problem. They want responsive information in real time. They will often listen to the first voice they hear and are only now learning to verify what they hear on social media. One of the interesting things that we learned is that families, particularly in Melbourne's western suburbs where there are large newly arrived communities, families are relying on the young people in their family for information, particularly where that young person might be the best or only English speaker in the house. For instance, after the Maribyrnong floods, when people were looking for information about where they could get help, that was largely coming via young people and via social media into the families who needed it. Young people are constantly on their phones, but they're often not actually taking information in. And if they do see something as they're kind of scrolling that they do want to go back to, they'll either save it or screenshot it. So in that sense, static posts are good, but they also want to see faces. That kind of, it from their perspective, makes information far more trustworthy. So in that sense, videos are also good. They often don't have headphones, and so they want subtitles or captions so they can watch without sound. They do not want legal jargon, and they will not engage with it. And they don't want to be preached to, they want to be respected. So based on everything that we heard, we decided to set up an Instagram page almost exactly 2 years ago. We decided at the time that we did not have the resources for a TikTok, and so deliberately made the decision to stick purely with Instagram for the time being. Instagram is a little more forgiving when you don't have the time or resources to give it constant love, whereas TikTok needs that sort of attention. So we decided to post thematically, and we've done a number of series on different topics. We posted via trial and error. It really was just learning what works, what doesn't, around what content looks like, how long it can be, the sorts of information we're sharing, the time of day to post, how often to post. We also gave the staff confidence to be bold and to try things and to learn from them. We also focus on function over form. I think it's safe to say that Westjustice doesn't necessarily have the most consistent looking Instagram, because we decided that we wanted to focus on getting information out there kind of quickly and making sure that the legal information was quality. And so we have kind of prioritised that rather than having a really, really schmick, consistent looking sort of page. And you can kind of see it's a really interesting exercise, if you're so inclined, to go back through Westjustice's Instagram, kind of see how we've evolved in the sorts of posts that we're doing. Over 2 years, our engagement has grown significantly. We are this close to 1,000 followers. Our posts now get a lot of shares. Our stories regularly get hundreds of views and saves. And it's easily where Westjustice gets the most engagement online. So I'm going to show you now an example of this is our single most liked reel to date. And you'll see it's not actually legal education, it's the promise of the legal education that's going to come. And so Vinny Shin, one of our wonderful lawyers in the youth team, was very bold and decided that he would help us launch our series on police interaction by doing a dance. It worked, because it is, as I said, to date, our most liked reel. So I'll show you this as an example of the sorts of content that we're sharing. to try and gain that traction and interest in the information that we're sharing.
2, 1, go!
And so here are some examples of where we've posted thematically. So our first series was about engagement with the police. So everything from being stopped, searched, arrested, and interviewed by police. And we focused on doing that with a range of reels, so sort of piece to camera type content, as well as then following that up with a static reel with the information as concisely as possible so that it could be shared, saved, and screenshotted as needed. At the moment, most of our community legal education on Instagram is being done by our youth law team and by our employment and equality law team, and that's where most of our topics come from. So we've done a series on being safe at work, cyberbullying, again, the police series, and then we also post kind of topically depending on the time of year. So we do tips on what to do and what not to do at Schoolies Week, information about, employment over the kind of Christmas casual period, and then things like where minimum wage has increased so that young people can understand their rights as they are kind of changing. I'm also now going to show you just a really brief example. I've trimmed it down a bit. A more serious example than our dancing video. This is our most liked legal education post. And this is one of our wonderful school lawyers, April, talking us through some information on what to do when you're stopped by police.
I'm April, I'm a school lawyer from Westjustice, and I'm here to give you a rundown on what to do when you're stopped by the police. To keep things simple, we've come up with the 4 C's. That's chill, clarify, cooperate, and complain. First up,
Chill.
it's normal to feel nervous, especially when you've had negative experiences with the police in the past. But staying calm can help you think clearly and hopefully avoid the situation getting worse. Next is
And so, as I said, we really like to post reels like that with a lawyer giving, explaining in really simple language a young person's rights or responsibilities in a particular situation, and then follow that up with a static post that's really easy to either screenshot or share. So here's just some examples of the screenshotable information we like to share. So one on being stopped by police, one on a handy checklist for when you're buying a new car, and then one on what it means to be carrying a weapon. And we can see how many saves we get. We obviously can't see how many screenshots we get, but we can see the saves, and information posted like this in a single page in a really concise, easy way always gets a lot of saves, which hopefully means it's serving its purpose. We also use the Instagram more broadly for information sharing, and I've just got some examples here of how we do that. Through the hard work and commitment of our school lawyers in particular, making sure that there's actual young people following our Instagram page, we do also have a number of kind of like-minded stakeholders, other CLCs, other youth type services, and government stakeholders. And so we use it as a tool to share information with them as well, either to promote the fact that we have services for young people and other people in the community, or to share information so that other service providers are more familiar with what a legal problem is and where young people can get help if they need it. So the top example is where recently we had the Attorney General with us to share, to launch our new strategy and our new offices. We did some information around what the New Zealand citizenship changes meant for young people in Melbourne's West. Our Yes campaign, an example that we'll probably repost in the coming weeks is around getting young people getting their ATARs and making sure they know that that's not the end of the world. And then really simple things like when we're closed and who to contact in our absence. And we find this is also a really helpful way to get information out into the communities. So my hot tips: post early and post often. Canva is absolutely your friend, and Canva is free for not-for-profits. So I highly recommend you invest in that. Use the right templates for the right posts. That's also where Canva really comes in handy. Static posts are squares and reels are rectangles, the shape of a phone. And it really does make a difference. You can kind of tell when someone's used the wrong one. Use captions, not just for the kind of accessibility, but it means that people aren't limited to having to listen to the information. They can just kind of read it in real time. Film in portrait and film in a quiet spot. Cross-post with other organisations. We have cross-posted with other youth organisations like the Centre for Multicultural Youth. We've cross-posted with VLA and a number of other organisations, and that really just expands the sorts of information you can share and the sorts of audiences that it's going to. My number one tip is to have fun with it. If you take yourself too seriously, young people won't listen. And I'd limit that not just to young people. People know when, you're trying just that little bit too hard. And I think that a large part of the reason that we've got the traction that we have is because our lawyers understand their audience really, really well, and they are willing to be serious when they need to be, when information is really important. And it's really important that young people understand it, but they're also willing to have fun with it and take the mickey out of themselves a little bit. Use other tools available, stories, quizzes, polls. We often run polls about what sort of series we should do next. We run quizzes after we've done CLE to see if people are actually engaged. And my other big tip is develop templates so you can respond in real time. I have a kind of standard story template just on my phone, on my computer. We had an instance as recently as a couple of weeks ago where we knew that Victoria Police and the Australian Border Force were at one of our local train stations stopping and searching people. And so having that template ready to go meant we could share a story really quickly saying, we know that there's authorities at this train station, and then reshare our kind of searches and police stop and intervention posts. And then at the end of the day, it's just trial and error, and you have to be willing to kind of to go with it. And I've included here an example of that trial and error. This post here, we posted it recently, is far and away our most liked post ever, more than any of our reels. And it's about, it's a piece we're trying to do on changing the narrative on youth offending, and really pointing out that so many of the issues that are facing young people and their families at the moment are connected. And so it got over 12,000 impressions, a whole range of shares and saves. And then 2 weeks later, we posted on the same topic and it absolutely tanked. I think it got 11 likes. And we posted in the same template at the same time of day. And I don't know what happened. Maybe people were sick of it, or I don't know. We're still kind of analysing that one. But I think it just goes to show that you really do have to be willing to try a whole range of things, and be willing to kind of dust yourself off and try again when things don't go as well as you had hoped. And I'll throw to questions shortly, but I just really want to very quickly acknowledge that there's actually a lot of people who contribute to Westjustice's Instagram and social media work. I didn't actually do the work to get the initial VLF grant. That was Annie Davis and Rita Semenatafa. I kind of came in at the point at which our Instagram was established and have run it from there. Emily Wrigglesworth and Daniel Scull are our media consultants, and of course to the teams who prepare the content and are willing to take risks. The lawyers are the ones who show their faces and do all the work. And obviously our sincere thanks to the VLF for their grant to make all of this happen. So that's it from me. I'm happy to hand over if there's any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. That's awesome. Really loved hearing about that. And there's so much in there, isn't there? Just in terms of, like you're saying, it's actually almost like a creative outlet for people, especially for, for your lawyers who may not have been the face of things as much in the past, but actually it's a really nice opportunity for them to kind of get their faces out there and share their knowledge in fun and creative ways. So with that in mind, the question and answer box is blowing up. So I'll jump to that in a second. But I just had one quick question, because it is, your law team that is that's producing the content for these reels and these posts and things like that. Did you guys give them any training or anything like that, or was it just kind of throw over to them and see what they came up with?
That's a really good question. We did actually. We had a whole half-day session on it, also supported by the BLF, and brought in that media consultant to really firstly explain the findings of what we'd heard from young people in those consultation sessions, and then to kind of walk them through how we were planning to kind of disseminate the community legal education on the Instagram, and to really give them the confidence to try things. We really didn't know how everything was going to go, and so we spent a long time kind of building up their confidence to say, if you distribute this legal information and it doesn't go well, that's not on you. I'm happy to wear that as as the head of Westjustice's media, and kind of work through it from there. And they've been phenomenal. Not everybody wants to be on the Instagram, and so we've kind of make sure that those people who don't want to show their faces can kind of come up with those static reels. I'm not a lawyer, but I did a couple of reels on my area of expertise, which was making sure that young people's names were on the electoral roll for the couple of elections and the referendum that we've had, to kind of put my money where my mouth is and show, I'm willing to walk the walk and put my face out there. And so hopefully to give the teams confidence that they would do the same. And they're bless them, they're so engaged. They do such a good job, and they really do want to get information out there in kind of the easiest and really interesting ways possible.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. And with that in mind, actually, have you noticed any uptake, I suppose, in young people coming to see you IRL in real life after having engaged on Instagram? Is there a kind of correlation between an increased uptake in that, or people just interested in engaging on social media?
Yeah, we have. We definitely get a lot of questions in our inbox. We get a lot of DMs around, hi, can I make an appointment? Or can you tell me if this is a legal issue? We try and avoid giving legal advice via DM, but we use that as a channel to kind of say, hey, why don't you come and have a chat with one of our lawyers, and we'll work through it from there. So it's been a really good way of kind of building our building awareness that we exist and building that awareness of what might be a legal issue. And I think also showing young people that lawyers exist in a whole range of formats, and that they're not really scary people who speak legal jargon and cost a lot of money, that they really are friendly people who are on your side and who really want to help you. So I think the Instagram has been seminal in that. Whether or not it's translating to a whole range of clients through the door, even if it's just a couple, I think it's serving its purpose. So
yeah, and just in terms of, like you say, building that confidence and demystifying the sector around, lawyers being seen as these kind of scary folk in suits that are unapproachable, and even, the law being seen as something that's there to punish as opposed to something that's there to help you as well, feels really important. I'm trying to get to so many questions. There's so many in here. There's one that 6 people have liked, so I'm going to ask that one because it's obviously a popular question. And it's an interesting topical area at the moment around the social media ban, or potential social media ban, for young people. Do you have a plan or a strategy in mind if that sort of comes into place? Will there be pivoting, changing tactics? What do you reckon?
It's a really good question, and we're sort of still working through what it will mean for our content. I think largely the young people who are engaging in our content are 16 plus. Or kind of young adults. And so it will probably take some of our following away, but I think the sorts of people we're trying to target are that kind of later high school, young adult type range. So I'm not sure it will have a huge impact there, but we are still thinking through, what it will mean for our content, what it will mean for how we find new ways to engage those people who are now excluded from social media. Particularly where those people are, the information seekers for their family. How do we make sure that they're getting the support and servicing that they need if they can't access that via, the means that they've been using for a number of years now.
Yeah, brilliant. And in terms, you were talking before about, I suppose, the analytics and kind of being able to track the number of saves and all of that kind of stuff, and I suppose seeing the spread and which posts are most interesting and most followed, I suppose. how do you incorporate that stuff into your further strategy as an organization? Is that stuff that kind of feeds into your broader work as well as the social media work?
Yes, absolutely. We know that the more something is shared, obviously, the more traction it will get. So whenever we're launching a new series, I spam the bejesus out of all of our kind of like-minded youth services who we follow and who follow us, and give them a bit of, hey, if you share this, I'm happy to share something of yours in, the next couple of weeks. And when we get that kind of shared traction of, hey, we're launching a police series, so we target all those organisations who we know would be interested in that and get them to share that content. That's always really helpful. So building that in and making sure that anything we're sharing on Instagram, that we then make sure to draw it to the attention of kind of relevant other organisations, is always part of the strategy. But we do analyse every couple of months what's played really well, what hasn't played really well, and try and learn from, okay, why did it work so well? What were the factors that led to it? Was it just really topical? Did we send it? Did we get it, time it perfectly and get it under the right people's noses? And it's usually a combination of those things. And then we just try and replicate that.
Yeah, brilliant. And one question that seems to be coming up quite a lot is around, I suppose, the resourcing of it. And you said before, obviously, TikTok felt a bit too far for you guys in terms of the amount of love that you need to kind of constantly, show that platform. But there is obviously a give and take in terms of social media, and making sure it's not just a blasting out information, it's a listening exercise and a relationship building exercise as well. So do you have a sense of how much resourcing it would take for people to be able to, or for organizations to, I suppose, do this well? And to add to that question here, somebody has put in these words: have you considered hiring cool young people to lead the Insta work? So in terms of that comment earlier about some old 30-year-old person doing posts, does that kind of align with the resourcing, having that kind of youth engagement in that work as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are both very good questions. So I'd say resourcing wise, it is to do it properly, it is a good couple of hours a week to kind of create the content. And our lawyers, if it's legal education, our lawyers create that and kind of make sure that it's approved through the right legal supervision channels internally. And I just make sure that our logo is straight and we're not saying anything too political. And so, but to do it properly, to then, post it as stories, share it, make sure that it's kind of getting that traction, is quite a few hours a week. So you do need to give it some love. In quieter weeks where we're not running a series and we're just sharing information, it really is just kind of, a few minutes here and a few minutes there. But I think to do it properly, it is, if you really wanted to go whole as bowlers, it could even be a part-time job, just the Instagram alone. But that's where I think, we obviously as a sales team, we have extraordinarily limited resources. And I think sharing the load of having different teams and different topics across, the different sorts of legal work we do is also really helpful. So it's not always the youth team or not always the employment team having to do it. And so trying to take the load off them as much as possible, reusing CLE that they're already doing out in the community and kind of turning that into really short, sharp posts. Using Canva, which again is pretty user-friendly in terms of turning this into something pretty schmick pretty quickly. In terms of getting young people, actual youths in, I would love to do that. I don't think we have the resourcing to bring one in. I would love a full-time media person. So if the VLF have a grant going for getting a full-time media person,
we'll tell our
I'll be
people
first in line. But I think whenever we do have actual youth, including, like our PLT students or student interns or anything like that, I do often wave things under their nose and go, is this cool? Would you engage with this? And try and make sure. And actually, they always are pretty generous in going, oh, maybe you could phrase it like this, or maybe we could do it like that. And we did have, we did do some analysis on who our audience was to make sure that we weren't just preaching to, this little echo chamber of other youth services, and really tried to make sure to bolster our following amongst young people. So we have school lawyers who have, got QR codes in their offices to make sure that young people are actually accessing this for the purpose which it is intended.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We've reached the end of the webinar. And I know that there's still some questions that we haven't quite got to. So what I'll do is I'll share these all with Caitlin afterwards, and maybe we can, create, without adding extra work to you, Caitlin, come up with some responses that we can share afterwards if that would be useful. So I just wanted to say, yes, obviously this recording and the slides and any additional resources that we've talked about will be sent out after today's session. There will also be a link, if it's not in the chat right now, it will be very soon, which is to a very, very short feedback survey, which we would love to get some feedback. If you're in the room already, just do it while you're here. And it would just help us to kind of plan future webinars and think about what topics and themes might be useful for people. Obviously, we love hearing from folk in the sector that are doing interesting work. So any particular topics or themes that you would love to hear about, please give us a shout and let us know. Most important thing, if everyone can grab your phone right now, you can see on the screen here, there's Following Westjustice on LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram. Get into it. VLF is also on all of those platforms, so you can follow all of us today, and hopefully we can help Caitlin reach the magic 1,000 followers on Instagram, if nothing else comes out of today's session. Thank you so much to Caitlin for bringing your energy and your wisdom and your knowledge about this and your experience and sharing all of this, and also sort of sharing where things didn't go well. That's really refreshing to hear that, and also helpful, I think, for people who are kind of starting to go down this road, which can be a rocky and scary place to go, but interesting to try things out. Also, thank you to Jackie, who is our fabulous behind-the-scenes technical facilitator, who none of this would have happened if it wasn't for Jackie today. So thank you so much, Jackie. And thank you to Susanna, our brilliant Auslan interpreter, who's been doing so well keeping up with our speaking very fast sometimes. And thank you all to you for joining us for this morning's webinar. And I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks so much, everybody.